Prince Harry is back in the UK. And no, this isn't some polite courtesy visit. This isn't a gentle reconciliation tour. This isn't a man returning to heal old wounds. This is someone running back to the very place he once torched on his way out. Think about that for a second. This is the same man who sat under studio lights and calmly accused his own family of cruelty. The same man who cashed massive checks explaining how broken, heartless, and suffocating the royal system was. The same man who walked away from protection, power, silence, and privilege, loudly insisting he didn't need any of it. Until now. Because people don't go back to places they claim destroyed them unless something has gone terribly wrong. People don't sprint toward institutions they branded toxic unless those institutions are suddenly the only shield left standing. This isn't about pride. It isn't about forgiveness. And it definitely isn't about nostalgia. This is about fear. Real stomach-dropping panic. Whatever Harry is facing isn't something a California publicist can spin into a feel-good narrative. It isn't something you fix with a podcast monologue or a glossy press release. And when someone who once couldn't stop talking suddenly seeks silence again, it's because they're terrified of what happens if the talking continues. And the talking has already started. The source of that fear isn't in Montecito. It isn't in London either. It's sitting behind concrete walls and razor wire inside a Florida prison. Ghislaine Maxwell is serving a 20-year federal sentence. Her social circle is gone. Her influence is gone. Her future has already been sealed. And that's exactly what makes her dangerous. Because people stay quiet when silence still benefits them, when they still have friends, when they still have leverage, when there's still hope of escape. Maxwell has none of that left. According to what's unfolding behind closed doors, she's no longer speaking in half sentences or vague suggestions. She's speaking in names, real names, names of people who moved through the same elite rooms she once controlled, side by side with Jeffrey Epstein. And when someone like that decides to talk, the consequences don't start on social media. They start with private phone calls that end abruptly. Emergency meetings that weren't on anyone's calendar, flights booked without announcements, decisions made fast, quietly, and with shaking hands. Because testimony doesn't care about reputations. It doesn't care about fairy tales or branding. Once words are spoken under oath, they don't stay locked in a room. They leak. They echo. Somewhere in those conversations, one name allegedly caused a ripple strong enough to travel all the way to Montecito. And that's when this stopped being gossip and became survival. To understand why those names matter, you have to understand how Epstein's world actually worked. He wasn't just rich, and Maxwell wasn't just some glamorous socialite. She was a gatekeeper. She knew who belonged in which room, who got access, who stayed invisible. She understood where powerful men relaxed, how they moved, and who was placed near them. This wasn't red carpet Hollywood with flashing cameras. This was quiet power, private rooms, no recordings, no paper trails. And that's why proximity matters. Not because everyone present committed crimes, but because being there means seeing things, hearing things, noticing patterns. Memory doesn't disappear just because time passes, it waits. There were people moving through those environments who weren't accused of anything, but who were present while abuse was actively occurring. And in the legal world, being present can be enough to raise questions. That's the world Maxwell helped build. A world that looked glamorous from the outside and dangerous on the inside. A world where silence protected power for decades, until silence stopped paying. On the surface, Soho House looks harmless. Soft lighting, stylish rooms, creative types pretending they aren't networking, a private club for artists, filmmakers, and designers. That's the brochure version. Behind the scenes, it functioned as something else entirely. A corridor, a quiet passageway between worlds that don't usually mix openly. Hollywood brushed shoulders with finance. New money met old power. People who loved attention crossed paths with people who avoided it at all costs. This wasn't where deals were announced. It was where they were understood. Openings weren't random parties. They were curated environments designed to feel alive before powerful guests arrive. The right energy, the right faces, the right people filling seats. Influence doesn't happen on red carpets. It happens in private spaces where nothing is recorded. And once you understand that, Soho House stops looking like a party scene and starts looking like infrastructure. That corridor matters because once worlds overlap, they don't always stay separate. Before palace balconies and royal headlines, Meghan Markle was moving through that corridor. According to the narrative, she was flown internationally for Soho House openings, including one in Istanbul in 2015. She wasn't the star. She wasn't the headline draw. She played a quieter role insiders describe as social filler. That term isn't an insult. It's functional. Social filler keeps rooms lively, smooths conversations, fills seats before real power arrives. It doesn't come with spotlight, but it comes with access. What raised eyebrows wasn't her presence. It was the lifestyle attached to it. International flights, luxury accommodations, constant movement, and not once or twice, but consistently. At the time, she was a supporting actress on a cable show. Comfortable? Yes. Jet-setting elite lifestyle comfortable? That's where the math stopped adding up. No one accused her of anything. That would have been inappropriate. Instead, people did something quieter. They noticed. Memory doesn't demand answers immediately. Back then, no one whispered, no one confronted. They simply remembered. Because when something doesn't quite make sense, the brain doesn't panic. It waits. Years later, when that same woman is standing beside a prince, waving from palace balconies, memory suddenly finds context. And with context, old observations don't disappear. They reframe themselves. Once royalty enters the picture, the past doesn't get erased. It gets managed. People replay rooms they were in, trips they heard about, connections they didn't question before. Not out of malice, out of logic. These weren't rumors invented later. They were quiet details waiting for the moment they mattered. Royal families have faced inconvenient pasts before. They don't erase them, they contain them. Look at Princess Sophia of Sweden. Before marrying into royalty, she had a documented history in glamour modeling and elite party circuits linked to Epstein-connected environments. Once she became royal, that history didn't vanish. It simply stopped being discussed. Or look at Norway's crown princess Mette Marit, who publicly apologized in 2019 for maintaining a friendship with Epstein, calling it poor judgment. The apology happened. The story closed. The institution moved on. This isn't about shame. It's about systems. Royal institutions absorb history. They bury it beneath ceremony and duty. Once a crown enters the picture, the goal isn't truth, it's stability. Then, everything shifted from quiet curiosity to something much more serious. During the civil case brought by Virginia Giuffre, the woman whose testimony destroyed Prince Andrew's public standing, Meghan Markle's name nearly entered the courtroom, not as a defendant, as a witness. That distinction matters. Witnesses aren't accused. They're people who may have seen something, heard something, been present when moments later became important. According to court-related positioning, her name was considered for 3 reasons. She lived in the United States, making jurisdiction simple. She was described as a close associate of Prince Andrew during a specific period, and she was said to have been present within Epstein's social environment during the years abuse was actively occurring. She was ultimately not called, but the damage wasn't in the outcome. It was in the fact that investigators with subpoena power looked at her history and believed there was something worth asking about. That's when curiosity turns into risk. Prince Andrew didn't fall because of tabloids, he fell because of sworn testimony. Once questions were asked under oath, the fairy tale collapsed instantly. That's how scandals actually end, not with headlines, but with records. Andrew became the example royal families study when things go wrong. Proof that silence can protect you for years until it can't. Harry understands that, because once testimony starts moving, it doesn't care who you are or who you married. That's when panic becomes logical, which brings everything back to Harry's sudden return. He didn't come back for nostalgia. He came back because the royal institution knows how to survive scandals that don't end with gossip but begin with testimony. They have lawyers, fixers, protocols, centuries of experience shrinking problems instead of letting them explode. Harry walked away from all of that. He dismantled it publicly. And now, for the first time, he may need it more than ever. Because if Ghislaine Maxwell keeps talking, this doesn't end with opinion pieces. It ends with questions under oath. And one question towers over all of them. What did Harry know, and when did he know it? If he knew about his wife's past, then he helped protect it. If he didn't, then he walked blindly into a risk that now threatens everything he built. Either way, the fairy tale is over. This was never about jealousy. It was never about tabloids. It was always about who was in the room and how long silence was allowed to protect power. And here's the part no one wants to say out loud, but everyone is quietly thinking. Once silence breaks at the top, it doesn't just drip downward, it floods. People who stayed quiet for years don't suddenly grow brave out of nowhere. They speak because they sense the ground shifting beneath them. They speak because they realize the protection they trusted is weakening. And when one person starts naming names, others start checking their own memories, their own timelines, their own proximity. That's how pressure builds. Not in public, in private, in whispered conversations that end with, "Do you remember that night?" In texts that start with, "This might sound strange," but in lawyers asking questions that don't feel hypothetical anymore. The danger isn't what's already known. It's what hasn't been connected yet. Because once patterns start forming, denial stops working. And history has a cruel way of resurfacing exactly when people think it's buried deep enough. For Harry, this is the nightmare scenario. Not because of headlines, but because of unpredictability. He built a new life on control. Controlled narratives, controlled interviews, controlled timing. Testimony destroys control. It moves at its own pace through people you can't silence and systems you can't charm. And once that machine starts turning, there is no rewind button. That's why this moment feels different. Not loud, not chaotic, just heavy, like the air before a storm. The kind where everyone senses what's coming, but no one knows exactly where it will land. The past isn't knocking politely anymore. It's leaning on the door, waiting. And whether Harry likes it or not, whether he admits it or not, the walls he once ran from may now be the only thing standing between him and total exposure. Because in the end, secrets don't disappear, they wait. And they always choose the worst possible moment to speak. Possible moment to speak. Possible moment to speak.